What's going on, tamers? It's me, East, the sleepiest tamer out there. Oh, hold on. Ooh, I could use a nap. Anyway, down to business. First off, a couple of channel updates because a lot has been happening these past few weeks. First thing, we finally found an editor for the channel. Guys, say hello to Seiji. He's been working with me for a couple of weeks now, actually. He's worked on editing everything from the Everything About BT16 video to the Ukamon video, the Scramble video, which was super popular, as well as the Tower Kabuterimon deck profile. Guys, please give him a warm welcome. And Seiji, if you want to say anything right now, now's your time to do it on screen.
Thanks, Ish. Hey everyone, I'm Seiji. Hope you guys enjoyed the video.
So next up is Taskmaster. I have not forgotten about this at all because Worlds was last weekend and I have to go to Singapore for business this weekend. Things are progressing a little bit more slowly than I would want them to. Right now I'm aiming for a release around the end of next week, so stay tuned. And finally, Japanese meta reports. So because my schedule is so wonky right now, I'm going to break my schedule just a little bit and then we're going to slowly get back on track as I think week 3 approaches. So week 1 for EX6, which you guys know has just released in Japan, will be this video here, which should go up around the end of this week. And then week 2 will happen around the middle of next week, just because I'm not here during the weekend and I don't have any recording equipment with me in Singapore. It's going to be a little bit later on that one than normal. But by the time we hit week 3, we should be caught back to our normal schedule on Sundays for YouTube channel members and then Monday for everyone else. And so with that, let's actually get to week 1 of the EX06 Infernal Ascension meta. Alright, so for the first week of results, a couple of things to know right off the bat. Last week was the first week of EX06's Infernal Ascension, and at that time, that week was Worlds. And during the Worlds event, there were 2 separate events for Japanese players only. One was the 1-on-1 Super Tamer battle, and the other one was the 3-on-3 Super Tamer battle. And as a result of people preparing for that and trying to put together decks so quickly in the first week of a new set, there's not a lot of information sharing actually going on. So a lot of folks are keeping their cards really close to their chest, and as a result, we see less results overall. So this new set is mostly known for yellow and purple cards, and as a result, you're going to be seeing lots of decks that are either purple or yellow. So really quick takeaways from last week is that it feels like the 7 Great Demon Lords deck is the clear winner of all the new stuff that's come out in this past set. Of course, we also had things like Mastamon, Ragnalord, Shakamon, and the 3-Gate Angels deck, but it feels like those decks aren't really performing right now. I will say Ragnalord did put up a couple of results, Angels put up surprisingly a couple of results, but I'm really surprised that Mastamon didn't really make much of an impact, considering how popular Mireille and all the Mastamon cards are. Of course, we cannot forget Diaboromon also got support during the set, but I think that most folks are still waiting for BT7 once it gets its alternate win condition to see the full power of the deck once it gets more support from there. Regarding decks from some of the more previous sets, it seems like there's been a split between the Vaccine Yellow, Magnamon, and Rapidmon armor decks yet again. So it feels like, and I even witnessed this during the 1-on-1 Super Battle and the 3-on-3 Super Battle, Super Tamer Battle, this past weekend at Worlds, is that it feels like more folks are gravitating back toward Magnamon, and honestly, I don't really know why right now. I'm still trying to figure this one out. The deck lists haven't really changed that much, and so maybe people are just becoming more comfortable, or maybe Magnamon just has better matchups in this set overall. And while the 7 Great Demon Lords deck does feel like the star of the show right now, it's kind of cool to see the other like Titan-style decks start to rise back up into the game, things like Deva as well as the Royal Knights cards. What's super interesting, and we're not going to see it this week, but I had a chance to talk to some of the Japanese players last weekend, is that people are also running one copy of the Yggdrasil card from Royal Knights in the 7 Great Demon Lords deck. And in the case that you open up with the Yggdrasil as your first card, you suddenly have the chance to reduce the cost of your Demon Lords by 12. Unfortunately, you lose access to Ogudamon, but in return, you do gain like 1 cost beat sticks that are level 6s and things like Leviamon and some of the scarier stuff out there. It's really cool to see the early onset of like how some of these decks can even be mixed, and I'm interested to see if you can use some of the 7 Great Demon Lords cards in some of the other decks as well. And so to wrap up here, I think that this week's results are going to be really light, but I'm looking forward to next week's one because there are no like big events happening within the foreseeable future, and so we can look forward to more open tournament results as a byproduct of that. So the first deck we're going to take a close look at this week is going to be Shakamon. This wasn't a deck that was really on my radar, but after seeing it and then looking at how the deck is built, I'm kind of interested now. The deck is mostly built up of cards that are in the EX6, so if you just get cards from EX6 set, you can build most of this. I will say that the lower end here is mainly focused on the Digimon engine, which is really cool because the level 2 Digimon as well as the promo Digimon here essentially lets you draw 3 cards whenever it moves out to the raising area and attacks. And then in order to get rid of floodgates on your opponent's side of the board, you can use the Digimon X Antibody here, who drops a 3k or lower, which pretty much encompasses all of the floodgates in the game. And if you don't have access to the Digimon X Antibody, you also have access to cards like Fireball, which can be used in 2 different ways. First being removal if there is a lower DP Digimon on board, as well as if there's not one, you get to just draw 2 cards. The main focus of the deck though is playing out the level 5 cards here at a cheaper cost because they can all be Digi-crossed with one other card. And then their effects essentially just spread out security tech minuses throughout the field, whether it's your Digimon or your opponent's. And then each of them have like a supporting effect alongside that. So the Sanzomon here lets you search. The Gokumon here lets you destroy Digimon with 6,000 DP or less. The Sagomon, I believe allows you to prevent Digimon from suspending for the next turn. And then the Chohakaimon can buff itself up and become a blocker. And then once you've stalled your opponent down by giving them so many security attack minuses they really can't attack anymore, then you do like the Pole Shift and play your Shakamon here to give all of your Digimon who gave themselves security attack minus security attack plus. So it basically swaps all the pluses with the minuses and minuses with pluses, which means your Digimon essentially just gets super huge for a turn. Additionally, while you're waiting to get that giant polarity shift from the Shakamon here, you've got some really scary level 6s and things like the Venusmon, 2 copies right here. The 1 copy of Quantumon, which I think is an interesting choice. I didn't really expect to see that in this deck, and I'm interested to see how it works out. I'll have to do some testing whenever I get a chance. Additionally, it's got 3 copies of the Valkyriemon Ace from BT16 here, which is essentially just Shine Greymon Ruin Mode Light. And then 1 copy of the Ophanimon here from EX6, as well as 3 copies of the Seraphimon, who allows you to recover and then remove cards off the board. Or in Ophanimon's case, gives Digimon's DP minus. Outside of that, it's just your normal yellow support cards, things like the TK here to search security, as well as go to 3 every turn, as well as a couple copies of the Memory Boost to search out the cards you need. With so many copies of these guys here, you're always going to be Digi-crossing them, and when they're destroyed, you can send 1 card back to hand, which means you will not so quickly go through all of them, but you're going to quickly run out of resources because you're not really drawing from just hard playing Digimon from the Digi-cross. And then outside of that, the memory gain from the Memory Boost is always just really nice to have. And then finally, we have 2 copies of the Heaven's Judgment here, just because this deck has so many yellow plus 1 other color Digimon here, in the black from the Chohakai, the blue from the Sago, and then you can't see here, but the Gokumon has red as well as yellow, as well as the top end here, who gives you green, red, and blue as well. This card just does so much damage potentially, and it's just an easy way to remove most things off board. So if you're a fan of those mid-range / control style decks that have the ability to just flip the script at any moment, then definitely try out Shakamon. The next deck we're going to take a look at is going to be the most popular deck in the format right now, which is 7 Great Demon Lords. And while I think there's a ton of different ways to build this deck, there's a ton of little tech options you can also add in, this is probably one of the more basic builds that I've seen. The game plan of the deck, of course, is to get at least 7 differently named 7 Great Demon Lords cards underneath your Gate of Deadly Sins. Then you can play an Ogudamon from the trash, and then he just attacks, basically discards all of your security, and just wins the game. To do that, this deck wants to fill up your trash as fast as possible using cards like the Sistermon Blanc here, as well as the Creepymon in English, I think it's called, Daemon in Japanese, as well as things like the Beelzemon, and finally the option card Miss Memory Boost. You see we've got lots of ways to also get cards from trash that we might need with the Rivals Barrages here at the bottom. And we've got 4 copies of the Rise of the 7 Great Demon Lords option card, which is really similar to the Royal Knights equivalent option card, which basically lets you stack a card from hand or trash up underneath your Gate of Deadly Sins, and then later on delay, you can just play the Digimon from sources for a turn. Each of the 7 Great Demon Lords has really nasty ways of playing around and controlling your opponent's board, making sure that their side stays nice and clean, because your gate every single turn is going to wipe your entire board out. During your later turns, you're going to be able to get out some of your more expensive 7 Great Demon Lords for pretty cheap, and things like the Leviamon, as well as some of the Beelzebubmon here. And you'll notice that they run a couple copies of some of the evolved versions of the 7 Great Demon Lords, things like the X Antibody here, as well as the X Antibody for the Beelzebubmon here. And keep in mind, where the Royal Knights deck has the restriction that you cannot Digivolve, this deck doesn't have that sort of restriction. So you see the copies of those cards here in tandem with their option cards, because these can be nice little ways that you can help clear the board more effectively in the later game. I will say probably the one weakness of this super basic build is that right now, if an opponent plays like a Psychemon or a Digimon that stops you from reducing play cost, you're going to be in a really tough spot. This deck doesn't really have a lot of great answers to that outside of cards like Biting Crush, which is still a very expensive removal for a level 3 Psychemon. If you are looking for an answer, however, to get rid of some of those floodgates, I recommend cards like the BT8 Pandemonium Flame, where you can just delete one of your Digimon like a Sistermon or a Lucamon, and then you can just delete the level 3 off the board as well for a much lower cost of 2 rather than something like 8 or more. And our last deck for the day is going to be everyone's favorite Diaboromon. Now, it's been a long time since this deck has gotten any sort of support. I think it was back in BT5 was the last time I saw anything useful for its archetype. But here in EX6, we've got a bunch of new stuff to play with. I'm going to start here on the top end, give you the dessert first here. The new EX6 level 6 Diaboromon here is a menace. On Evolve and on the start of main phase, and whenever your opponent plays a Digimon for the first time on their turn, you can play a Diaboromon token, which means this guy multiplies very quickly. In addition to that, all of your Diaboromon tokens and Diaboromon on the board get jamming and blocker, which makes for some horrendous combos. The BT2 Caramon, which you see here, which is an alt art, and the BT2 Chrysalimon here lets you draw cards and gain memory whenever you play a Diaboromon token basically on the board. Keep in mind these effects for inheritance are not once per turn, which means if you keep playing tokens, you can keep gaining memory or drawing cards. At the lower end here, the rest of the level 3s essentially just lets you search out your Digimon as well as your Tamers. Everything in this deck is searchable with the exception of the Mamemon, which we'll get to in just a moment. I think it's a cool inclusion, but we'll talk about why it's here in just a sec. The new EX06 Chrysalimon allows you to reduce its play cost by deleting an unidentified trait Digimon, which is essentially everything in the deck, like I said before. And you can also pop a 3 cost or lower Digimon when you do that, either evolve or play him. And finally, rounding up level 4s here, the BT5 Chrysalimon lets you gain Rush and Inheritance for all of your Digimon with the same name, which is awful, especially when you consider the EX6 Diaboromon here. You can tell I have PTSD because I played against this deck last weekend and it was rough. But additionally, if you don't have an Arata Tamer on board, the Chrysalimon here lets you play him out for free. Speaking of Tamers, your Arata Sanada Tamer is one of the most important cards in the deck, and finding him is paramount to you finding victory as well. And that is exactly why we have the Mamemon here. The Mamemon here lets you open up top 5 cards of your deck and then grab a 4 cost or lower black Tamer and play it on the board for free among them. And because Arata sits at 3, he's a prime candidate for this effect. The other level 5 in this deck are 4 copies of the EX06 Infernal, who on inheritance lets you de-digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon whenever you play a Diaboromon token, once per turn on either turn. And this is incredibly disruptive, especially when it happens on your turn and you're trying to get up the chain. Running at the top end of the deck, we've got 2 copies of Amagemon. Useful, 2 copies seems like maybe a little much. I might just include 1 here, but that's just a personal preference. We've also got 2 copies of the Diaboromon Ace here, as well as 1 copy of the Diaboromon promo card. This one is black, where a lot of the other Diaboromon cards in the past have been white. This guy, for as many Diaboromon tokens you have on the board, he gets Secret Attack +1. So if you have 3 tokens, he gets Secret Attack +3. And then to wrap up this list, some cards that might be difficult to see here. This is 2 copies of the Izzy Tamer here, the Black Izzy Tamer, as well as 2 copies of the Black Memory Boost and 3 copies of the Black Training. Quick story time moment. Last weekend I played against this deck in the 1v1 Super Tamer battle event. And I thought I was safe for like 2 more turns, and a guy got down a couple of Diaboromon tokens, and then they played the card BT3's Beast Cyclone. It's a black option card that costs 3. But because the Diaboromon from EX6 gives all of your Digimon blocker and jamming, Beast Cyclone says that all of your Digimon who have blocker or reboot gain Secret Attack +1. He built up this force of Diaboromon tokens, and then he just gave them all Sec +1 immediately, and I just lost the game from there out. I was so dumbfounded. I was like, wow, this is even a thing? I completely forgot about that card entirely. So if you're looking for a tech that's going to ruin your opponent's day like mine was last weekend, definitely try out the BT3 Beast Cyclone alongside this deck. So that's going to wrap up week 1 of the EX6 Infernal Ascension meta report for Japan and the rest of Asia. What's really interesting about the weeks to come is that first of all, we're going to get more results, but we're also going to get the inclusion of the new Scramble cards and the new Ace cards added to the game. During the Worlds event, these cards were on sale, and so from this week, like week 2, we can look forward to seeing those cards in deck and people trying them out. There's been a lot of buzz already on Japanese Twitter about these cards, and lots of people trying to share ideas and figure out like what are some combinations you can use them with. So I'm really excited for next week's results. I personally have been messing around a lot with the new Gallantmon cards, including the Megadramon Ace as well as the Red Scramble card, and it feels like the deck becomes much smoother with the addition of both of these. Side note, if you haven't seen my video on the Scramble cards, I definitely recommend you check it out. It's probably one of the cooler videos I've made recently. It shows off a bunch of really neat combos that weren't possible in the game before, but thanks to the way the Scramble cards work alongside some of the memory setting Tamers, the game gets really wacky. Before we wrap up, let me know what decks you guys are playing right now in EX6, or what decks you're looking forward to playing when it drops over on the English side of the game, as well as some of the combos you guys have been cooking up for some of the Scramble cards. I'd love to talk about those in the comments below. Anyways, folks, I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.